Hello, freak bitches.
Well, we've tried other online interventions too. So I have my these YouTube videos up, but we also designed. I worked with some corporations a while back because I've done some consulting, and I had designed tests to help people hire better employees, which I still do. And in fact, I work with this company up in California called the Founder Institute, and it's the world's largest stage early technology company incubator. It's created 2,500 companies in the last 4 years, and we test now in 135 cities. But when I was marketing these tests to companies, they kept asking me what could be done about their poorer performing employees. And I said, well, I didn't know, because it's not that easy to, if you have someone who's problematic, who's troubled, it's not that easy for a manager to figure out how to straighten them out. And they just don't have the time. They don't have the time, they don't have the manpower, and they don't have the training usually to do that. But I designed this set of programs called the Self-Authoring Suite. And one of them, the Future Authoring Program, helps people write out a plan for their life. So it helps them, it asks you some questions about 6 dimensions of your life, your health, mental and physical, your use of drugs and alcohol, your wishes 3 to 5 years down the road for intimate relationships, for family, for career, for education, and so on. It asks you, what could your life be like 3 to 5 years down the road if you set it up for you like you were someone you were taking care of? So it asks you those 6 questions. Then it asks you to write for 15 minutes about your vision for your life. You get to have what you want and what would be good for you. What would that be? And then it asks you to write for 15 minutes about what your life would be like 3 to 5 years down the road if you let your bad habits and your idiocies and your foolishnesses and your weaknesses take the upper hand and auger you into the ground. Because everyone knows about that. And so it's like you get to design a little heaven to strive for and a little hell to avoid. And then you write for, then you basically turn that into an implementable plan. That's the second part of the program. We've used that with about 5 to 7,000 university students now, mostly in Europe at the Rotterdam School of Management. And we've raised their grade point average of their kids 25%, dropped their dropout rate the same. And it's had a walloping effect on men and on non-Western ethnic minorities. It's moved the non-Western ethnic minority student population performance at Rotterdam School of Management from 70% below the average to above the female Dutch natives. And so the reason I'm telling you this, apart from the fact that it's a very good program, and we did it at Mohawk College in Canada a year ago, and we dropped their dropout rate in the first semester 50%. And that especially, again, worked well for men, because men are at more risk of dropping out now, and especially for men who didn't have good grades in high school. So not only is there the possibility for the net to provide tremendous dissemination of intellectual material, but there's also the possibility for the net to provide dissemination of psychological interventions that have major impacts on people's mental health and productivity at extraordinarily low cost. So that's really been fun too. So,
well, I think providing that sort of a structure and a framework, giving people the tools, just in form of asking them questions. What would you like to do?
Yeah.
Please describe this. What is your future? And when you do that, you sort of allow them to help themselves outline what they would like to accomplish, which most people don't do.
No, well, in our education system was designed in Chicago in the late 1800s to produce factory workers. Because it was set up when rural people were migrating to the cities en masse, because their kids, first of all, were likely to get factory jobs, and second of all, if you were working in a factory, your kids needed to be taken care of. And so the purpose of the schools was to train factory workers, which is why everyone's lined up in rows and why there are bells. It's a factory model. The problem with that is that now people's careers basically have to be self-determined, but that's never part of the education system. Part of the reason I developed these programs was because I realized this is the same course where I'm teaching students that if they would have been in Germany in the 1930s, they would have been Nazis. I'm trying to get them to design their lives. And it's way better to have someone articulate their own plan. You actually neurologically rewire people by having them formulate their own thoughts, which is why, your school teachers used to say, put it in your own words. It's actually very good advice if they would explain what that means. It's like, if you have to conjure up the thoughts and you have to articulate them, then they change you. And so this program has had the effects have been absolutely overwhelming for us as researchers, because it's very, very difficult to produce an intervention that actually has a positive effect on people. You know, you hope it does, but generally when you test it out, it's like, nah, it doesn't do what you thought it did, or sometimes it even has the reverse effect.
That sounds fascinating. Now, how do people have, how can someone, a regular person, have access to this?
It's called self-authoring. So that's SELF, authoring, like writing a book, selfauthoring.com. And the programs, I gave away the future authoring program. I think it might still be free. It is till the end of November. I did a video called Message to Millennials, where, because one of the things Jonathan Haidt said about, he called Karl Marx the patron saint of the social justice warriors, and John Stuart Mill the patron saint of people, say, who stood for objective truth and freedom of expression. And I thought that was really smart. He said Brown University is #1 for social justice warrior universities, in Chicago for truth universities. But one of the things that Marx has over John Stuart Mill is that Marx is a social revolutionary, and young people like to think about ways to change the world, right? And that's actually a positive part of their development. It's a stage that the developmental psychologist Jean Piaget called the messianic stage, and he associated that with late adolescence. It's like, while young people want to change the world, the problem is that that's been harnessed into attempts to change other people. But that isn't what you should do. If you want to change the world, you should change yourself. And I don't mean that in some cliched sense. I mean it in the sense that Alexander Solzhenitsyn said when he analyzed the Soviet Union. He said, don't be thinking that the line that divides good from evil runs down a political spectrum or countries or something like that. It runs down right down the middle of your soul. And if you want to sort out the world, then what you do is you sort yourself out. It's a serious business, right? They say it's more difficult to rule yourself than to rule a city. And that's the truth, because you're complicated and there are horrible monsters inside of you that need to be tamed and to be brought into alignment and submission so that you can be a powerful and useful person. And I gave away the future authoring program as part of this video I made, suggesting to millennials that instead of rushing out there to change the world by changing other bad people, that they should look inward and sort themselves out properly. And I think we've given away about 4,000 or 5,000 of those programs so far.
Now,
I'm
you said
thrilled about
it's
that.
free till the end of November, and then what happens with it?
The future authoring program is regularly $14.95, and the whole self-authoring suite, which involves, it's a program that helps you write an autobiography. So it helps you sort out things about your past that are still burdening you. You can tell, if you have a memory that's more than 18 months old, approximately, and when you pull that memory up to mind, if you still have an emotional reaction, that means you haven't fully articulated the memory. You haven't analyzed it causally. You haven't freed yourself from its grasp, and you're carrying it like a weight. And your brain responds to that. Like the more weight you're carrying like that, more baggage, let's say, the more of the stress hormone cortisol your brain produces. And cortisol makes you old. Some of this work has been done by James Pennebaker at the University of Texas at Austin, because he started to pioneer these sorts of writing programs, and he found that if people wrote about uncertain things, past, present, or future, so they could be traumatic things, they could be uncertain things, that their physical health improved. And he did a lot of detailed research trying to figure out why that was, and basically came down to the explanation that it was something like an uncertainty reduction mechanism at work. Because your brain is always figuring out how well situated are you in the world. How much do you not know compared to how much have you mastered? And you can tell that you've mastered things because when you go somewhere and you act, things turn out the way you want them. That's an indication of mastery. And your brain is sort of keeping track across your whole life of how many places you've been where things haven't worked out compared to how many places you have been where they have worked out. And if all those places in your past where things haven't worked out, you need to map and master. And that decreases the existential load on you, but that actually decreases your psychophysiological load. It makes you healthier. It makes you less stressed. And so we've put all that together in this self-authoring suite to help people write about their past, to sort it out in a detailed autobiography. It asks you questions about your past. It says, divide your life up into 6 epochs, and then divide each of those, that might be, say, birth to kindergarten, and then maybe elementary school, and then maybe junior high school, however you want to do it, and then to write about the emotionally significant events in each of those epochs, and then to describe their effects on you, and then to analyze how you did in those situations, what you might have done differently, what you might have do differently in the future, to straighten out your past. And I've done that with my students in my Maps of Meaning class for about the last 10 years, and some people have written 15,000 words. It's not that uncommon for students to write 15,000 words in their autobiography.
Wow.
So
that's such great advice. That's such great advice about reconciling with your past, because so many people just carry it around.
yeah, well, if you're thinking about your past, what it means is you haven't analyzed the causal chains. Because you might say, well, why do you remember your past? Well, you might say, well, it's in order to have an objective, record of the past. It's like it has nothing to do with that. There's only one reason you remember the past, and that's to be prepared for the future. That's why you remember the past. And so what you're supposed to do is take the past and extract out from it wisdom. And wisdom is the ability to avoid stumbling blindly into ditches. And so you think, well, here's a time in my past I stumbled blindly into this horrible ditch and terrible things happened to me. It's like, okay, you need to take that apart. You need to figure out, how was it that events conspired with your participation, voluntarily or involuntarily, so that terrible consequence emerged. You need to know why that happened and how you could react differently in that situation. And as soon as you do that, your brain will leave it alone. It won't obsess you about it anymore, because the anxiety producing parts of your brain are basically trying to tell you where there are obstacles in your environment. It's like, look out, don't go there, don't go there. It's like, well, don't go there, there's fire. Well, maybe you could master the fire, right? Then you're a wielder of fire, you're not just a victim. And lots of situations are dangerous or not dangerous depending on your level of mastery, right? I mean, life is like that. And so a negative emotion that's associated with a memory is something that's crying out for mastery, and writing can really help with that. So you're reorganizing your brain when you write autobiographically. You're basically, the emotions, memories can be stored at different levels of your brain, from sort of primordial reptilian image-laden areas that are very emotional, up to finely articulated plans for your future life. Well, you want to take everything that's negative and emotional and transform that into a fully articulated vision for your future. And that frees you of your past. You shouldn't be thinking about your past. I mean, maybe if you're 80 and you're going over a well-spent life, that's a whole different thing. But if you're 30, 35, or 20, and most of the time you're thinking about your past, it's like your soul is trapped back there. And you need to free it through investigation. And the metaphysical language is appropriate, because that is, in a sense, what you're doing. You're trapped in the past. It's like you got to break free of that so you can use all your resources to move ahead into the future.